What a game.
What a game. The excitement, bearing in mind that the stage of the competition that it is, you don't expect these two giants to come together in February. It's normally April or May, but the excitement, you felt it. And as soon as that Champions League music comes on and you see the players lining up, you're thinking, this is going to be some challenge. And those type of games, at times, you kind of always hope they live up to expectation. That first half absolutely did. There were moments when I was commentating and I should really put my mic down, but I felt so compelled by it. And I think on about 4 occasions, I was going, wow. And not necessarily for strikes on goal, but there were just moments, Joe, where the quality of the players, where one player looks like he's got 3 around him, you're thinking he won't be able to get the pass off. He drops his shoulder and somehow manipulates the ball to do it. And the ball just seemed to be zipping on the pitch, just seemed to be playing so quick. It was a great viewing watch.
Yeah. It was zipping. It was wild. Second half, it was kind of all bets are off here. Let's just play.
Yeah, it did feel that way. And I was giving so much credit to City for actually staying in the game. I felt Real Madrid had so many chances. I think that's the most chances that Pep City's teams ever conceded at home.
Yeah.
And you did feel at times that, certainly in the opening period, that Real Madrid were trying to walk it into the net. And I was thinking, this is not the norm. You've got to take advantage. And then when they were in that position where Haaland gets the second goal to put them 2-1 up, with only minutes left, it's felt, just see out the result. And you're in this tie then for what would be a massive game at the Bernabeu in the return leg. But as we've seen so often with this City team, not just in terms of that incredible collapse in that 3-0 up against Feyenoord, but we've seen it throughout this season. I've got so many examples in the Premier League. At Brighton, they're 1-0 up. They end up losing 2-1. You think about the Manchester derby, they're 1-0 up with only minutes to go. They lose that game. Of course, PSG recently. So we shouldn't be overly surprised, but yeah, it did feel like they really let themselves down last night.
Yeah. It's amazing how often it's happening, really. Because just sheer game management, even if you have dark arts and players go down injured and just do all sorts, even if you're not in a good place, you should be able to just try and kill the game in slightly better fashion than they seem to be able to.
Yeah, you even looking back into that game at the Emirates, it's 1-1 with just over half an hour to go. They lose 5-1, and you're thinking, how is this happening? And the reality is that as soon as the opposition increase the tempo or flex their muscles athletically, this City team just cannot cope. And you're kind of looking at scenarios in terms of why is this happening? And the obvious one is Rodri. And I think people think that Rodri is that kind of Roy Keane, Vieira, patrolling in midfield and protecting the back four. But he's not that, and he never has been that. But what he has been, and what has been so synonymous with Pep's great teams, wherever he's been, is ball retention. He keeps the ball. And that allows those defenders to regroup, get into good positions, feel happy about where they are, assess what's happening. But because they keep turning the ball over, which is incredibly the biggest drop-off with this Manchester City team is how often they do give the ball away. Straight away, the opposition are at that back four, and they just can't cope with the intensity of it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That is actually the most confusing thing about City, the most interesting thing about City. I can see how they're being run over physically. Everybody can.
Yeah.
A lot of players have miles on the clock. So that's fine, and that's a weakness there. But as you say, the extent to which technically on the ball they seem to have gone off a cliff and started making the most basic mistakes is the most fascinating aspect for a team that we've become so accustomed to over the last couple of years. And it's everyone. It's not just like a Kanji makes a mistake the other week, leads to a goal. It's like Bernardo Silva, who's usually neat and tidy, is now just being dispossessed in a bad way. That's the most confusing aspect to Man City. That just on the ball, maybe one begets the other and they start losing games and this is the last thing to go. I don't know. You'd have a sense of it better than the rest of us. But it's gone. Like they're not sharp and good on the ball anymore, which is amazing.
They don't trust each other. And that's what is actually incredible, bearing in mind a team that's been so successful for so many years, is that with that loss of confidence, they're not making those passes. And yet last night at times it felt like the City of old. And you think about that brilliant goal where De Bruyne drops into left back, plays it through the thirds. Guardiola drives inside. It's a lovely reverse pass. And it's fantastic for that Haaland goal. And you're thinking, okay, they're back. But unfortunately, we saw the Manchester City of old. But then the game played out where we've seen the new Manchester City where they just can't see out results. But if you think about even that great Barcelona team, and at times they would have had Mascherano and Torre at centre-back. Now, they're not elite centre-backs. But because they had Xavi, Iniesta, those guys, Busquets, They don't give the ball away, so you can't get at them. Now, as you rightly said, Joe, because they give the ball away so often, it is exposing these defenders, and it's asking them to defend under pressure, and it's asking them to defend one attack after the other. Whereas before it might be just one. They get the ball back, and then you have a breather for what can actually feel like about 10 minutes. Not now. And I think everyone from the lower teams in the Premier League are sensing it, and they're going after City, and they just cannot respond to it. It's incredible.
On that point, Danny Ceballos had interesting comments after the game. He said, "We went out with a bit of anxiety for the first 10 minutes, but then we saw they weren't quite at it."
Yeah, and I think that probably sums it up. And yeah, I'm looking at Real Madrid and thinking, if Ceballos is in midfield, you should be able to dominate against him because he can't run either.
Yeah.
And Real Madrid had a makeshift back four, and you're kind of thinking, okay, maybe everything's falling into place for City here in terms of getting that lead late on. They're in with a great chance. But there were so many moments there that as soon as Real Madrid just upped it a little bit, or Ancelotti has, which he's so good at doing anyway, I think this is underestimated, the slight adjustments that he made just to regain the control. We saw that last year when Bayern Munich looks like they were going to go away from Real Madrid and go to 3-1 up in that semi-final. He makes a little bit of a tweak, rescues the game back, and he did it last night. And I think it's a real worry for City, because I don't think this is a quick fix. I generally don't think that this is something that's going to be fixed this season. I think they need to get to the end of the season, and it's going to have to be a massive reboot in terms of where they go.
Yeah, it feels near impossible for them to turn this tie around.
Oh, no, I can't see it at all in terms of going over to the Bernabeu, in terms of how that front four, they're not going to miss as many chances as they did last night. And that wasn't just Real Madrid doing it. Even in that game against PSG, where City lost 4-2 or having been 2-0 up, they faced 26 chances. So it's not a case of, they were just brilliant. Real Madrid on night creating so many chances. Every team's creating chances against this Manchester City team. They just cannot repel attacks.
They went with Stones in midfield again and had, in effect, 5 centre-backs. So that's kind of back to their treble-winning Stones in midfield shape. Did that work okay? Was that reasonable?
Yeah, listen, I think he's a very comfortable ball-playing centre-back going into midfield, but you can notice the difference that he can't take the ball on the half-turn with two people around him. He'll have to always go back, and that just allows the opposition a chance to regroup, whereas the likes of Rodri or elite-level central midfielders, Roy, Patrick Vieira on the half-turn, they're driving forward, they're passing forward. But there were defining moments in the game, of course there was, in terms of the fact that Ederson penalty was reversed, because that looked like a horrendous start from a tight offside in City's favour. But Akanji going off at right back was huge. And I just felt it in commentary as well. I felt, the option was to bring Rico Lewis in. And he is your kind of modern day fullback, where he'll operate into midfield. But if he's asked to go 1v1 against the best left winger in the world, he was never going to be able to cope. And it proved that way. Yeah.
I mean, it is a strange game in that you could look at the timings of the goals and say, oh God, City were sucker punched. But then, as you say, they had 20 shots to City's 11. Madrid had 20 shots to City's 11. And then if you want to go back and forth again, you could say, God, look at the 3 Madrid goals, though. I mean, shooting ourselves in the foot much, and then a shinner from Mbappe. Yeah.
Did you see Mbappe with like Bellingham and Vinicius Junior? And they were like laughing at his technique, and he was like quite sheepish, going, I know I should be volleying that in, not shinning it in.
I mean, that's as high a shin as I've seen in a long time. That cleared the ankle several inches. So that's the other, like City, the shin, that is legitimately unlucky. And then the 2 other goals they can see, like even that third goal encapsulates so much, where was it Kovacic knocked it back to Rico Lewis? So he's flat-footed. Ederson comes out, doesn't get the ball. And then Stones is just outrun by Bellingham. It's like a million little cuts killing them.
Yeah, it was. And it was on the back of the second goal, the equaliser, which is probably the most incredible one, bearing in mind that Ederson, shanks a clearance. This is the goalkeeper who's elevated, passing out from the back like no one ever. He set a standard that we'd never seen before in the Premier League in terms of that left foot. So many people saying he's like a playmaker back there, and he kicks a ball out of his hands straight to Real Madrid, and you're just thinking, oh my God. And he compounds it by the most unorthodox attempt to save the shot that originally comes into with his hands by his sides, and it just goes straight back to Diaz, who taps it in. And again, Diaz was able to run in behind Kovacic at the heart of that midfield, and just so many avoidable errors for all three of those goals.
Yeah. And it's funny when you see the players afterwards asked, why does this keep happening? Or Pep asked, why does this keep happening? They're all just like, I don't know.
Well, the reality is that in terms of the amount of goals that they concede late on now, that's 20 goals conceded now, Joe, this season in the last 15 minutes. And the obvious conclusion to make there is that they just can't cope with it anymore. They're an aging team. They're a wonderful team, and we'll always look back on them as arguably the best we've ever seen in the Premier League, that group of players, that squad of players. But it looks like there's too many miles on the clock now.
Did you think Madrid were good? Are you impressed with them? Because they've been up and down a touch domestically.
No, I wasn't overly impressed by them, but this is the February version of Real Madrid, like the November version that Liverpool just brushed aside.
Yeah.
And that's not what we judge Real Madrid on. It's the April and the May version. And that's the concern, is that when they get to that stage, I don't know how they keep doing it. I mean, how have they won that game yesterday? And how many times have we said this about Real Madrid in the Champions League? How have they won that game? And yet they still do. They have that, whatever it is, that inner belief that is, and that arrogance that this is their competition. And I don't know. I think I do look at the scenarios, and Ancelotti said about the fact that he feels the winner will come out of this tie. Well, it certainly won't come out of the versions we saw last night. No chance. There'll have to be a massive improvement from Real Madrid. And then you look at who will potentially threaten them. And I look at the likes of Liverpool and how good they've been. But ultimately, I dissect it by saying they've got Van Dijk, they've got Konate, they've got those guys at the back who can stay with the running machines that Real Madrid have. And then it's a kind of shootout, isn't it, at that stage? So whether or not that will be the way they'll meet, I'm not sure what stage it will be, but it'll be some game, I've no doubt.
What a striking dynamic where "Stop Crying Your Heart Out" banners unfurled.
Oh God!
It cuts to Vinicius, but then it cuts to Rodri taking photos of it in the crowd.
Yeah, I know.
Rodri, play it cool, Jesus.
It was amazing because he's standing in the lineup there just as they're kicking off, and the Champions League music comes on, which is so emotional anyway, isn't it, for any football? I think as soon as you hear that, you think this is going to be special. And I looked at him, and he's just going like this. Okay. You know, like you see those boxers looking at each other in the middle of the ring as a ref's talking to them, and you're thinking, oh no. You're tempted to put your head down. You're thinking, why are you trying to antagonize him anymore? And the motivation, and he said it post-match, yeah, it gave me a little lift. And you're thinking, timing's everything in football, and that banner should have been held maybe when City are 2-1 up or something like that, or at the end of the game, and it would have really landed.
Yeah. Curious for your thoughts on Mbappe and Haaland, just because, you know, for a long time now they've been pretenders to the throne, the Messi, Ronaldo throne. I guess probably leaving a couple out, maybe Vinicius included. But to my eye, it looked for a while like once Messi and Ronaldo exit, these two will be the two. And, you know, Mbappe's 26 now, so like he's at his peak, give or take, and Haaland's 24. They're not hitting the levels of Messi, Ronaldo. We're not seeing those kind of jaw-dropping performances on a consistent basis from them at the moment. No,
and certainly I think it's unlikely, really, when you think of that kind of like head-to-head Messi, Ronaldo. I don't think we'll ever see the likes again, but that's not to take anything away from how good those two are. And Mbappe's struggling a little bit in terms of playing that centre-forward role, and even at times when he's played that for France or PSG, he still likes to gravitate towards the left, which can get a bit congested with Vinicius Junior. And that's one of what's so good about Ancelotti is that he was saying, no, in that second half, hold your positions in a way that he did in that Madrid derby in the second half when they were chasing Atleti, because they were just a bit too fluid, and it was kind of easier to mark when they hold their positions and literally identify and say, right, I'm going to go after you. And Vinicius went after Lewis in that second half. You could see it. That's when it's so difficult to stop. Of course, Haaland, I thought last night, Joe, he was so motivated. You could see it. He was angry. He was aggressive. It was as if he felt that all this talk about Real Madrid's Fab Four, and even in the build-up, I mean, doing my research, there wasn't much being mentioned about Haaland. And that's what the frustration must be, that he's got the double to see out the match, to win 2-1. And it's like, okay, now ignore me at your peril. But his defence, his midfield just let him down. And that's what's so frustrating from his point of view, no doubt.
Yeah, maybe I'm being a bit harsh on him. I mean, he scored 2 goals. He's in a team which is struggling, and he's still scoring lots.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit harsh on Haaland, to be fair. And he's only 24.
Yeah, listen, the fact that he signed that 10-year contract suggests that that's what they're aiming to do. But we always felt that he one day might end up at a Barcelona or Real Madrid, and you continually do. But I think, they don't. He certainly is an out-and-out centre forward, and a lot of critique will be that he doesn't link the game as well. You can't really play through him. And then the flip side of that is Mbappe. He's not an out-and-out centre forward. And then you see the emergence of someone like Isak at Newcastle, and you think he's the real package. So whether or not those clubs will be in his eye line, Isak, I wouldn't be surprised. I got asked a really good question the other day. If you're a Liverpool supporter, would you take saving all the money that you're potentially going to give to Salah on his contract to really build the fund up and go big on trying to get Isak as your centre forward at Liverpool? And I've often been thinking about Isak for Arsenal and never really gave it any much thought for Liverpool. But that's a big question. I wonder how many Liverpool fans would sacrifice Salah to get Isak through the door at centre forward.
I know where Isak would rather go. Arsenal or Liverpool right now. Don't think. You mentioned Haaland being motivated. Like it was noticeable. Like second half's a bit of a write-off. Like if you didn't see the game, the second half was just wonderfully wild. It's kind of hard to analyse in some ways. It was just tackles and going at each other. But in the first half, it was kind of striking that Madrid just sat relatively compact in a 4-4-2 and gave City the wings and said we're okay. It's quite noticeable City did try and press quite a lot. Like there were times where Haaland's chasing really high up the pitch and De Bruyne is doing it as well.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, don't make old man De Bruyne do this.
That is such a cutting title to give him.
I was like, let's manage the. Okay, he's low on game time, but I was thinking, why? And their press wasn't even that good. It wasn't fully committed. There were times like that time where Mendy nearly walked it into the net. Madrid went the full length of the pitch there because not everyone in that City team is in on the press. Some of them are like, you're doing okay. No, I'll do it. But they weren't really doing it. And like De Bruyne and Haaland are breaking themselves further up the pitch to get the thing started, but the people behind them weren't fully on board. And I just thought, I don't know, Pep. I don't think that's the right thing for you to be doing for a few reasons.
No, and if you think about City's success, and we've mentioned it in terms of ball retention, the quality players they've had technical, but it was their intensity out of possession that was so good over the years, how they could force turnovers, and they just cannot. They just almost get there now. And you're right. I think De Bruyne was trying his hardest to try and create that, but not quite getting there. And you're talking about some of the best players in the world. That if that's the case, they're just going to pop it round you. And it's not even last night. Say 3 years ago, City were in the top 2 or 3 in the Premier League for forcing turnovers. They're 12th this season. So it's in front of you. You don't even have to doubt what you're seeing. You're thinking, I need some stats to back up what I'm seeing. Am I seeing this right? And the stats are there. And what you're seeing with your own eyes is there. And Pep Guardiola has said this season now is that he's kind of changing the philosophy. He's saying that the way to play football now is how Iraola's doing it at Bournemouth in terms of how they're getting the ball quickly into that final third and they're letting their front players express themselves and letting them play on their instincts, as opposed to Pep Guardiola. You know how formulaic his type of football is, and it's paint by numbers. If he goes here, you've got to be there. And the margins for that not working are huge because you've got to be the best of the best to do it. And they're not there anymore. And this is what's so fascinating. Watch Pep, that he must be a tortured soul because he believes in that way so much. But he's suddenly allowed this team to get old and they can't do it. And now the whole of that kind of reboot is going to be massive. It's just such a massive task now to get them back where he thinks they can be.
And do you think that brand of football, that positional-based football, that choreographed football, do you think that's done and dusted? Or with the right players, again, could it be as devastating and effective as ever?
I don't think I do think he'll start airing on the other way. For him to identify Bournemouth as as someone he's looking at now. I've seen a lot of Bournemouth this season, Joe, and I've told you about this. They're sensational. Bearing in mind that they've got about 11 first-team injuries. You never hear Iraola going on about it like Ange does or Arteta does. He just gets on with it and produces a winning team. They've got some young players there that's so good. So they're at the start of their journey. But for someone like Pep Guardiola to look at that and think that's probably the way to play football, because even if you think about that Barcelona team, even the likes of Henry, who was like an icon in the Premier League, having to be so disciplined on that left wing and just stay wide. Grealish now as well, as a maverick player, kind of like playing off the cuff in that final third, that was all kind of ironed out of his game. And yet, in the build-up to this game, he selects him on the back of having a good game against Orient and saying he's a street fighter, he's a street footballer, we want his kind of... And you're thinking, oh, right, so you are actually going that way now, allowing those forward players to express themselves. From a manager who's such a control freak, is he, in terms of wanting to be in total control of everything, in terms of the phases of those attacking plays. And maybe it is a changing of the guard.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Because Madrid don't seem like a very choreographed do this with the ball. When you get it's just like there's a degree of Ancelotti raises an eyebrow and says, you're all good players, go do it.
When that eyebrow comes up, it's just it's something to behold, isn't it? These football royalties, seen it, been there, done it. But he does understand that there is a requirement, and you said about it, Joe, how quickly they got into a narrow and really kind of like structured defensive shape, weren't they? In terms of, at one time, Mbappe at the point of it, the whole of that Real Madrid team were in the defensive third. So they were making it narrow. They were literally saying to Man City, okay, go wide if you want. And maybe that was by design to try and protect the fact that they had a makeshift back four as such, and the likes of Valverde at right back, who was excellent, I thought, and Asensio, the young 21-year-old centre-back. Oh, God, he looks like he's going to be a really good player. There's times where he was like elbowing, just walking up to Haaland, elbowing him in the back there, then getting his right elbow and elbowing him again. And he looked like he loved all that kind of the dark arts of defending.
Yeah,
they did it well. I think he knows when to kind of pull it in, Ancelotti, and he knows when to let him go, let him loose and let him express themselves.
Yeah, I find he's obviously just so likable, and he's just such a Rolls Royce career.
Yeah.
He's a curious manager in that there's times you watch a Pep team, and it's, over the last like decade plus, and you tune in to watch a Pep game, and you'd be like, wait, what's he done here? Kyle Walker's the underlap, and then you'd spend the first 15 minutes working out, like, he would have had a genius plan the week before, and he's come up with a new one for Everton away, and they'll have a new one another week, and it was amazing. And you would tune in to Ancelotti, and it would just be a bit like, well, this all just seems like fairly straightforward. But in a way, that's his kind. Like, his genius is, I'm going to move Bellingham to the left-hand side in Champions League final just to shore it up because Vinicius isn't covering back. And that, it's a simple thing, but it changes the game. He's kind of that type, as opposed to give me 10 minutes to work out what Pep's done.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a genius, Pep, isn't he? And it looks like he's a tortured genius in terms of, like, he can create his own problems as such, but iconic in terms of what he's done to football in the world. But Ancelotti just assesses it. He kind of like plays the hand that he's dealt, which is often a very good one, bearing in mind the clubs he's been at. But he knows when to do it. And you said about Bellingham, there were times last night where he just felt, do you know what? I'll drop Bellingham into that left-hand side because he'll stay with runners better than Vinicius Junior will. And I felt at times that even with Grealish playing, it looked like Grealish was getting the ball kind of deep from that left wing position, as if to say to Valverde, okay, come out of that right back slot. And then suddenly when he did, they were just playing balls down for that running strength of Haaland down the sides. And I was going, oh, wow, yeah, this is by design. This is going to hurt Real Madrid. Then suddenly, within about 5 or 6 minutes, seeing Ancelotti just give a little message onto the pitch, Valverde, just sit in your slot.
Yeah.
Let Grealish have the ball. We'll collect him at a later date. Don't come out of that position. And it's just little adjustments like that. Listen, he's an unbelievable manager, but we forget he was an unbelievable player in central midfield for AC Milan. So he knows how to work a game out. Yeah,
he's just working a game in a not look at me fashion. Small things, they add up and boom. Yeah, it's really impressive. On Grealish, quite often he was left in a 1v1 type scenario. The first time he got the ball, there were 2-3 Madrid players.
There
was a bit of an opening, and he went for it, and he won the free, softish free, he won the free. And I thought to myself, Jack Grealish, you went for it, because I was watching it going, he's going to check back, and he didn't. And I thought, oh, maybe someone's just loosening him up a touch. It was interesting.
You're so right. The three players were there, and there was no gap. Certainly was no gap to get his massive cast through, but he still went bullying through there with the ball to draw the foul. And you're thinking, this is exactly why you're in the team. And you just felt like it was a big decision, wasn't it, not to play Foden as well, whether or not whoever's in form, whatever. But on big nights, the quality of Foden, which he proved, obviously, with that brilliant skill to win the penalty. But it was such a kind of show of faith to Jack to say, okay, you're playing. And then for him to get injured, it was such a downer for him. It really was.
Because I think if City are really purring and there's still total trust in Guardiola, I think Grealish there maybe does check back. But I think there's a degree now of like, we got to do something. We got to try something.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to. And I think at times you want to rely on player. Listen, these guys have been in that final third and that instinct just comes on. But if you feel that as soon as you're doing it, rather than just going, oh, I can see it and I see it, I'll go after it straight away. No, what did he want me to do? Oh, he wanted me to check back on my left, go back on my right, so he can come onto the left, so he can rotate, so he can do. And you're just thinking, no, they're not at that level anymore.
And so is that kind of more the Areola style? It's like, get the ball to Jack. Jack knows what he's doing. Jack in that final third, let's go.
The Areola style, Joe, is get that ball into that final third as quick as we can, whether or not it's a lovely passing through the thirds or it's hitting it long.
Yeah.
And then suddenly those wide players, those forwards have got time to use their instincts, which they've been doing their whole life. You trust them as players, they're quality players. That left-hand side, Semenyo, Kirkez from left back, who's attacking all the time. I don't think there's a better left-sided combination in the Premier League as a partnership than those two. And there's so many in that team at Bournemouth at the moment where they'll be cherry-picked. Forget the pun. They'll be cherry-picked and so will the manager. The big clubs are going to come looking for them, no doubt about it. And I just think it's that kind of get that ball forward as quickly as possible and then let these players show their quality.
Yeah. It's funny, like maybe a bit like the Ancelotti thing. It's like, well, that all sounds very simple. Do you know what I mean? Pep's tortured over there and he's just like, let's just give it to the good lads early.
Yeah. How every lad on a Sunday plays or weekend as a kid. Get it to your best player in the schoolyard. He's a good player. Get it to him.
Talk about overcomplicating things.
Yeah, exactly.
Kai Havertz out for the season is the word. I don't know what he did in Dubai, but his hamstring is shot and the Athletic are saying he's going to miss the rest of the season.
Oh, God. And Arsenal put that Dubai trip from last year as like, it changed everything for her. And I read all the article from Declan Rice just yesterday saying, it's going to be great. We're resetting it. We're ready to go again for the charge. And then an injury like that. And it just shows you it can happen. And unfortunately, they just haven't strengthened that position. They're going to have to be creative now, Arsenal. But it looks like it's another opportunity that's gone in Liverpool's favour. They go in that last Merseyside derby at Goodison tonight. And I was doing the Everton-Bournemouth game at the weekend, which was their last FA Cup game. And the banners were all out and visually it looked great. And then Bournemouth just ruined them for that first half. Didn't get a kick. So I don't see Everton laying a glove on Liverpool tonight, regardless of the emotion.
Was Goodison a great place to play at?
Brilliant place, really was in terms. It's one of those ones like Highbury was back in the day, maybe White Hart Lane, and how Anfield. You know, when the crowd are right on top of you, brilliant. Such a great place. It'll be sorely missed, but football moves on, and they've got an amazing stadium to move into. And
was it were the dressing rooms dingy, and did it feel a little bit old for all of the atmosphere, or it was okay?
The atmosphere was fantastic. You walk out in that tight tunnel and it was like, if you think about that Highbury tunnel as well, you know, the famous one with Roy and Vieira having the argument, similar to Everton, you have to literally let your opponent go. If you go one by one, that type of way. And the second half, when you've not had a particularly good, you ain't letting people go. There's a few physical confrontations in those tight tunnels.
Yeah. And I guess it's the history of it as well. Like, it's amazing when you see the photos from 66, and I think Eusebio scored a hat-trick there. Like, it's so instantly recognisable, the kind of gated aspect on the upper stand. So it's kind of iconic in that way. But look, I guess you gotta move on. But it's a pity to lose that history.
No, it really is. And what's always difficult as well is that when the stadium is not on site, because even with Arsenal, if I go to the Emirates now, I still have to go on the same way that I would have gone as a kid to Highbury. Do you know, that way? So it's not different. Whereas West Ham, when we first went to West Ham to do some commentary there, you had lads I was looking at them thinking, a couple of blokes like, it might be 60 years of age, didn't know where they were going. You know, they won't be able to go to the same place. That's what's so special about the unbelievable stadium that Tottenham have, that it's still on site at White Hart Lane. Yeah,
no, amazing. I think that is everything. Anything else grabbing you in the world of football? I've nothing else.
No, the games are coming thick and fast. They've been brilliant. That was fantastic last night. We've got the Goodison Liverpool derby tonight. Fantastic. And then we go again at the weekend. Manchester City at home to Newcastle.
Oh, yeah,
Premier
you're doing
Sports.
that game. Yeah,
we're doing the commentary on that, which when you talk, we just talk about the City problems athletically, can't look.
Well, is that feels like a reheat of Old Trafford where that Newcastle 3 just ran all over Casemiro and Eriksen.
Yeah, I just feel that Newcastle, the energy they've got, the quality that they've got in that front three as well. I think Manchester City are up for a terrible game again on Saturday. Whether or not the brilliant moments that those players still possess, they just can't do it consistently for 90 minutes, as they have proved all season.
Very good. Okay, listen, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Gary Breen, thank you.
Thanks, mate. Speak soon.